Welcome to a new style here on the channel. I want you to dive into the story in a different way. From now on, the visuals won't be the main focus. Instead, I want you to feel each word, each detail. You to close your eyes, or let the video play while you relax in a quiet place. Whether that's your room with the lights off, or even in the car on a night drive. I'll guide you into this experience. And if you're listening with headphones, get ready because every sound is designed to make you feel the tension of the story. By the way, where are you listening to this story from? Let me know in the comments. I don't usually go out to eat, but on that specific day I decided to go to McDonald's. It was almost late afternoon. I was coming back from some shopping downtown, and since I was already hungry, I decided to stop and grab something quick to take home. I live in Michigan, more specifically in Grand Rapids. It's not a small town, but it's not a metropolis either, so these fast food places end up being a meeting point for a lot of people from the area. I parked the car, and as soon as I was about to enter McDonald's, a man came up to me. He seemed a bit out of place there, but he was wearing black clothing, something kind of like a security guard. He stopped me at the door, said something like, "Good afternoon, just checking who's coming in. I'm keeping an eye around here." I found it kind of strange because I had never seen security at that McDonald's. But I was in a hurry and didn't pay much attention. I said good afternoon back, a bit suspiciously, and went in. When I got to the counter, I ordered the usual: a cheeseburger, medium fries, and a Coke. The cashier was a young girl, maybe in her early 20s, and I couldn't help but ask, "Hey, do you guys have security now? There's a guy outside in a black uniform saying he's watching the entrance." She frowned and looked at me, confused. "Security? Here? No, we don't have anyone like that working here. Did you see a man at the door?" I told her what had just happened, and she looked visibly concerned. She called a colleague who went to the entrance to see if the man was still there, but by that time, he had already disappeared. Nobody else saw him. That started to make me uncomfortable, but I grabbed my meal and left, trying to brush it off. Life has enough worries, and I really just wanted to get home and relax. I drove back to my street, Cherry Street, which is a quiet residential area full of trees and old houses. I live alone in a small, simple but cozy house. After a day of shopping and that little adventure at McDonald's, all I wanted was to put my feet up, eat my meal, and relax a bit. I put my meal on the coffee table and turned on the TV. I think it was one of those home renovation shows, the kind I usually watch to pass the time. While I was sitting there, the man from McDonald's popped back into my mind. Who could he be? And why was he standing at the door claiming to be security? I always go to that McDonald's, and I'd never seen anything like that before. After a while thinking about it, I let it go and focused on the show. After a bit, I was almost done with my meal, grabbing the last fry, when I heard the doorbell ring. That already put me on alert, because it was almost nighttime, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I went to the door, quietly, and looked through the peephole. I was terrified when I saw who it was. It was him, the same man from McDonald's. He was standing there on my porch with that same serious expression and black outfit. It didn't make any sense for him to be there. My first reaction was to back away, slowly stepping away from the door so he wouldn't know I was home. I stayed in the living room, trying to think about what to do. I couldn't understand how he had followed me there. Had he noted my car's license plate? Or did he already know me from somewhere? I had no idea. The doorbell rang again once more. I tried to stay quiet, breathing softly so as not to make any noise. I waited a few minutes, then looked through the peephole again. He was still there, as if he had all the time in the world to wait. By this point, I was starting to panic. My phone was in the living room, so I went back to grab it and thought about calling the police. But then the doorbell stopped ringing. I looked through the peephole again, and this time, he was gone. I waited a bit to make sure he'd left, then went straight to the phone, dialing the police. I told them the whole situation, from McDonald's to him showing up at my door. The dispatcher said they'd send a patrol to drive around the neighborhood, but suggested that I stay inside and lock all doors and windows, just as a precaution. I thanked them, but the sense of security I once had in my own home was gone. I spent the night awake, tossing and turning on the couch, unable to relax. Every time I heard a noise outside, I jumped. I couldn't shake the image of that man standing at my door, and the strangest part was that I didn't know why. What did he want with me? The next day, I went to work earlier than usual just to get out of the house and not think about it so much. I stayed busy all morning trying to distract myself, but the scene kept playing in my head. During lunch, I even mentioned it to a coworker, and she suggested I check the security cameras from the neighbors. Maybe someone had captured an image of him there at my door. When I got home that evening, I went straight to my neighbor across the street, knowing he had a camera facing the road. I explained the situation and asked if he could review the recordings to see if the man had been filmed there. He was very helpful and started looking through the footage from that night. After a few minutes, he called me over to show what he found. The camera had captured the man standing at my door for at least 15 minutes. He was staring at my house, pacing back and forth, ringing the doorbell, and then, just like that, he walked away as if nothing had happened. My neighbors suggested we call the police again to show them the recording, and that's what we did. They came, watched the video, and meanwhile, asked me if I'd ever seen him before. I told them about McDonald's, and the officers thought it was strange but said they'd look into it. They figured it might just be some disturbed person who saw me and made up an excuse to approach me. Even after all that, I couldn't feel at ease in my home anymore. What bothers me to this day is the doubt, not knowing what he wanted. Why did he show up at my door? He looked like an ordinary person, but who in their right mind follows someone from a restaurant all the way to their house? I never went back to that McDonald's again, and I started avoiding places where I might see him again. Slowly, I tried to return to my routine, but always alert, with an eye on every corner. It was one of those midweek days, and I just wanted to go out a bit with my son after spending the day running errands downtown in Miami. It was a nice afternoon, typical Florida weather. Sunny but not unbearably hot. Since he loves eating at McDonald's, I thought it'd be a good idea to stop by, get him a quick meal, and give him some time to play. There was a McDonald's close by, so I didn't think twice. We went straight there. When we got there, it was pretty calm. Not many people, maybe about 3 other tables occupied besides ours. I ordered a Happy Meal for him and a coffee for myself. It was almost late afternoon, and I needed a bit of energy to get home and finish the rest of what I had to do. While he ate and got distracted with the toy that came with the meal, I was on my phone, answering a few messages. This wasn't the first time we'd done this. Actually, these quick outings were becoming almost routine. I enjoyed seeing him happy with these little things, and he loved the toy and the nuggets. But that day, when I looked around for a quick check, I noticed a man sitting about 2 tables away. He was alone, which isn't that unusual, but also not super common, right? Sometimes people are just there, eating alone, so I didn't pay much attention. But for some reason, he didn't look like he was just having lunch or waiting for someone. He looked more alert. I went back to my phone, but every time I looked up, the man was there, looking in our direction. I tried to convince myself he was just distracted or maybe found it amusing to see a mother and son enjoying the afternoon. But the longer it went on, the more uncomfortable that steady gaze became. My son, innocent as he is, kept to himself, laughing, playing, totally unaware. I, on the other hand, started feeling uneasy. It was like something was wrong, but I didn't want to get up and leave just yet because I thought I might be overreacting. Haven't we all felt like that at some point? After a while, I tried to distract my son, asked if he wanted more ketchup, or if he wanted to switch his juice, trying to break the tension. But he was so focused he didn't care. I was just about to decide to stand up and leave when, all of a sudden, the man got up. He passed by our table really slowly, as if he was looking for something, and each time he passed, I noticed he looked more closely at my son, as if he was sizing him up. At this point, I had a bad feeling in my chest. Something told me we needed to get out of there. I tried to keep calm, to not show it so as not to scare my son, who was still totally excited, not noticing anything. When I was about to stand up and grab him to leave, I left my phone on the table for a second, just to pick up his backpack from the floor. And in that instant, that brief moment when my attention slipped, the guy made his move. In the blink of an eye, he got closer, grabbed my son's hand and started walking him toward the door. The whole thing was surreal. My heart nearly stopped. It was like everything was in slow motion. It took me a second to understand what was happening, but as soon as I realized, I jumped out of my seat and yelled my son's name. It was a loud shout, one of those you let out without thinking. My son looked back, startled, and I think that's what caught the man's attention too, because he got scared and let go of his hand. I ran over to them, and without thinking twice, I pulled my son back close to me, putting him behind me as if I could shield him. I was so full of fear and anger at the same time that I couldn't even think straight about what to say or do. At that moment, the man tried to play it off, started saying something like, "Oh, I thought he was lost," or some excuse, but you could see in his face he was nervous. No one tries to take a kid by the hand so quickly and then comes up with, "I thought he was lost." All I could do was hold my son's hand tightly and keep an eye on the guy as he tried to leave. That's when the staff noticed something was wrong. One of the attendants came over, asked if everything was okay, and I told her what had just happened. She asked me to stay calm and said she would call the police. At this point, the man tried to leave, but other customers had already noticed the commotion and started blocking the exit, preventing him from escaping. A few minutes later, the police arrived. The officers came in, talked to me, and while I tried to explain what had happened, the man just stood there trying to keep calm. But you could tell he knew he was in trouble. When the police started asking questions, they found out he had already been a suspect in other attempted kidnappings. He wasn't unknown to them, but until then, they hadn't been able to get enough evidence. The officers said they'd take him to the station, and that I'd need to give a statement later. They gave me a card with contact info and asked me to come by the next day to make everything official. After they took him away, I sat there, holding my son on my lap while he quietly cried. I think only after he was gone did the shock really hit me. That fear, that feeling that I almost lost my son right there, in a place where I thought we were safe. I kept thinking about how close it had been, how a tiny distraction could have been enough for someone to take him away from me. It's something that even now makes my chest tighten just remembering. Since that day, I can't go to a public place without watching my surroundings, without keeping an eye on every person who gets close. Over time, my son started to forget what happened. He still likes McDonald's, but I've never been able to go back to that same place. Just passing by it makes me uneasy, reminds me of that moment, of that man. It's like a scene permanently burned into my memory. Later, I talked to the police, and from what they told me, the man had a history of involvement in kidnappings, but always managed to slip away because of a lack of evidence, or because victims hadn't been able to identify him. I was relieved that at least this time he didn't manage to take my son. But at the same time, knowing he'd tried this before with other kids made me realize how vulnerable we all are. Nowadays, whenever I go out with my son, I'm more alert. I never let him out of my reach, not even for a second. We think certain things will never happen to us until the day they almost do. It's like the world changes color, like we start seeing the danger we used to ignore. That's it. It was a situation that marked me deeply, and I know that maybe, to others, it seems like an ordinary story. But anyone who's a mother, who's gone through something like this, knows the weight of it.